First thing I wanted to do was, yeah, I posted this link in chat. And basically this guy, his name is Cherno, or the Cherno is what he likes to go by, but he's a C++ developer outside of, or he works at, or used to work at EA Australia, worked on Need for Speed Mobile and I think a Need for Speed console game. And then he left EA and he's now doing his own thing, making his own engine. And his YouTube channel and Patreon are helping support him. So as you can see, there are 90 some odd videos here. Did the math and it's roughly 3.5 videos a week. So if you, well, for you guys, it'd be a little bit more. So if you watch one a day, by the time you graduate, you should have absolutely everything you need to know about C++. So let's talk about some of these videos real quick. The first one is just introduction. You can skip it. The next three are setting up your Visual Studio for whatever operating system that you have. And then from there, it just dives deep into C++. You will need to look some things up. You will have to do some research. You are not going to be graded on any of this stuff. It's going to be all on you on whether you want to pursue this path. But learning this is not going to make you good at Unreal Engine C++. This will make you good at C++ in general. And with that, you can use to learn Unreal Engine C++, because I don't know if you guys are familiar. Let me see if I can do a quick image search real quick. This looks about right. Nope, that's not it. Yeah, so the C++ code looks something similar to this. Let me see if I can get this in a new tab here. Yeah. So it's not exactly C++. Yeah, you can do some C++ syntax here, but you're going to have to learn like what these U properties are, U functions are, and stuff like that. So it's going to be a little bit more difficult than just learning C++. You need to learn C++ first, and then try to learn Unreal Engine script. All right, so sorry for distracting everybody, but that's just something if you want to do in your free time, want to get better at programming in general. The way he explains things is just phenomenal. I highly recommend it. So please utilize that resource. All right, so today we're going to be talking about some debugging techniques. And the purpose behind these weekly meetings is really just a Q&A session. So this first one's going to be guided, showing you guys how to debug Unreal Engine, how to solve your problems that you may run across. But the rest of them, the other 3 weeks, are basically a Q&A session. There aren't guided lectures or anything like that. So make sure that you come to each meeting prepared with some questions. Last month, I only had one productive meeting the entire month. So I would like to utilize your time and my time a little bit more wisely. So each week, just prepare some questions that I can answer on stream, whether through guided walkthrough or just debugging your project, doing a screen share on your end, and I can watch what you're doing and see stuff. First, let me show you guys how to turn in. I think that's pretty darn important. So I just closed the project, and I want to make sure that you guys are very aware when you're about to turn in, save everything, close your project completely down, okay? Right. So you're going to close your project completely down. and everything's saved and you're ready for turn-in. So what you want to do is come to the Epic Games launcher, click on your Unreal Engine tab on the left, and then click Library up here at the top. Find your project. So in this example, I'm using this project right here. And then I'm just going to right-click it, and I'm going to show it in the folder. Okay, it's going to bring me to something like this. Go ahead and delete this back up real quick. I don't need it. And I'm going to go ahead and delete that folder as well because I don't need that. So you should see your project would look exactly like this. So you've got some sort of assignment number or name of your project. This is your U project file. Allows you to open up the engine from the browser right here, Explorer. And then you have 4 folders here. If you're in 4.25, you might have 5 folders. Okay, so this is in 4.24. So as you can see, it's an older version, so I'm missing a folder. If I were to look at this 4.25 project right here, as you can see, I've got this derived data cache folder that's new. That's the only real difference for folder structure for 4.25 and 4.4. But we don't need that data structure or data cache folder at all. In fact, we don't even need these intermediate and save folders. So what I can do is just delete those. Those are created on the fly by Unreal Engine. The most important folders are these two, config and content. Your config folder holds all of your engine settings, right? All of your input, all of your engine settings, all your editor settings, and any game-related settings as well. So that's super important when testing your project. You need all those settings so that your keyboard and your input actually work and the things you do in game actually matter, right? In your content folder, you'll see a bunch of stuff, right? So typically your last name, first name folder, it's got all your blueprints, all your art, everything related to the assets that your project uses. So to turn in, just grab the content and config folder and then right click the selection and go down to send to and hit the compressed. Now this will create a backup, so you can just say assignment for turn in, or your last name, first name, whatever you want to name it. But yeah, that's step 1. So this technically you can drop this zipped up config and content folder onto the FSO ready for turn-in. But we want to do one more thing before we do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to launch the engine again. And this is going to create a fresh project. It takes a second for it to do that. So while we wait, are there any questions about zipping up your turn-in so far? It's pretty straightforward. I figured there wouldn't be any questions. Okay, once Unreal launches, what we're going to do is create a new project, a brand new project, a blank project, a brand new game, blank project. Hit the next button. We want to make sure that we're ARM blueprint, max quality is fine, disable ray tracing, no starter content. Okay, we'll just name this test project. It doesn't matter what the name is. It's just so that you can test your work, okay? I'm going to show you exactly how to do that in just a second. So once it opens up the brand new project, close it, all right? And then we're going to go back to our library tab, and we're going to find that test project right here, okay? Right-click that, show in the folder. Then what we're going to do is just going to delete everything out of there except for the U project file, all right? And basically what this means is now we completely have an empty project with just a project file, no content, no config. I'm going to take my zip folder right here. I'm just going to double click the zip folder, not going to unzip it, just leave it zipped. I'm going to select those, and with it zipped, I'm just going to drag them into the test project folder. And basically what that's going to do is create a copy like you saw here. And then just double click the uProject file. And as you saw, this is a 4.24 version of the engine. I'm dropping it into a 4.25 project, and it'll auto convert for me. Right. It'll update those source files and save files to match 4.25. That's a great thing about Unreal Engine is you can go up in versions, however, you cannot go back down. So once I created this project in 4.25, I cannot go back down to 4.24. It's not going to let me. But as you can see, we have everything we need in here. Everything's just as I left it in the other project, ready for you guys to test your features. Okay. And the reason we use a blank, empty project to test features is because there's no bugs or anything like that carried over, right? If you're just dragging the content and the config, if there are bugs in those folders, yeah, those will carry over. But any other settings related stuff or Unreal related save files or anything like that, backups and stuff like that is completely wiped out. So you get a basic fresh build, okay? So let's talk about, since we're talking about builds, let's go ahead and take a look at how to build, right? So right here up in the top left corner, I see this lighting needs to be rebuilt for objects or unbuilt objects. Up here at the top toolbar, there is a build button. You can simply just click the build button and it'll build the entire project. Or you can hit this drop down right next to it, and then you can do like this one, which is build lighting only. And it'll run this swarm engine. If you see down here, there's a swarm agent. You may have to accept something to build that lighting. Absolutely accept that, because the swarm agent is just their back-end service that builds the engine for you. So you do need to allow it to modify your computer. Okay, once lighting has been built, as you can see, that error goes away, and I can move around and I can do my stuff. Let's talk about debugging. Any questions about backing up your work, getting a turn-in ready for submission, creating and testing a project, or creating a project and testing your work? Anything I've covered so far that, or building, that you have any questions about? All right. I'm just going to assume that you don't, and I'm going to move forward. Oh, I did get somebody. Okay, so the question is, so all we have to do after testing is submit the zip to FSO? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, once you're done testing, if it's good and you don't make any changes, then just drag the zip over into FSO. Okay, Sarah, what exactly did you miss? What step are you on? I'll try to show it to you again. Okay, so yeah, so we got our two test projects, right? So we zipped up our assignment over here. We created a test project, and now we're ready to move our zip files over to our test project. So what we're going to do is we're going to close our test project completely. Don't save, doesn't matter. It's just a test project. And then what we're going to do is we're going to select all of the folders in the test project and just delete them completely. Now I use Shift Delete there, which is a permanent delete. You can just use the delete key. That's perfectly fine. And then over in your backup, right, where you're ready to turn in, you're going to double click your zip file. You're just going to select the config and content folder and drag it into your test project. And it'll automatically copy for you. And then once your test project has that config and content folder, you can just double click that uProject file to open up the project, or you can go through the Epic Games Launcher and open up the project that way. I'm just going to use the test project today for the debugging tutorial. And as you saw, since we didn't save the lighting build, did not save either. So it's whatever state that project was in before I moved it into the test project is going to be the exact same state I'm going to get when I open it up. So do we need the scene for our scene in the zip when we submit? Yes, you should have a scene auto load. Let me show you how to do that. So up here in the edit, you're going to find project settings right here. And it's going to open up here. And then we're going to look for the project subsection or category, and then find maps and modes. And once you're on maps and modes, the editor startup map is the one that's going to get loaded when you open up the editor. So this is level 1, and it's loading level 1. And you can even I can show you that it's this level, right? So if I switch to main menu and then go back, it's the exact same level, right? And then the game default map is when you build your project for release. This will be the map that starts when the user clicks their shortcut icon or opens up the game on their end. It'll start up with the main menu. Now for you guys, you're only going to have level 1 because you're on assignment 1. This is obviously a completed assignment 4. So you're not going to have the credits or the main menu. You'll get those later on. You do not need the Unreal project file in the zip folder. That is not needed for turn-in. And the reason is we already have like test projects. So all we're going to do is just take your zip folder, double click it, drag those content and config into the test project, and then run your project. So the same exact steps that you take to test your project is the same exact steps that we take to grade it. So that's why it's important that you guys do that. All right, so that's project settings, getting a map, loading on default. Let's talk about some blueprint stuff. Where's a good place to debug some stuff? We'll just open up the base character. Like I said, this is a completed base character, so don't try to follow along with any of the code or copy any of the code. You're going to be doing all this stuff yourself. Okay. So let's say we have an issue in shooting. What I often see here is typically people forget to connect their branch. So I'm going to hold the Alt key, then I'm going to left click the true exec. As you can see, the exec kind of highlighted when I hovered over it with the Alt key. If I click on it, single click, it'll just automatically break that link. Okay. So what we're going to do is, let's just say both of these connections are broken, and we need to figure out, let's say we don't know about it being broken, we think everything's hooked up or whatnot. So we'll just assume everything's working, and we're going to play our game, and we're going to come in, we're going to try to shoot. And as you can see, nothing is happening. Our action is moving, our player is hitting its animation, it's playing its animation, but no bullet is spawning. Right? So, so when you're typically starting out in Unreal Engine and something like that happens, where you're like, oh, but I spent all this time coding it and it should be working, why isn't it working? I have no idea how to debug this problem. Where do I start? Okay, well, let's think about it from a input perspective. That's pretty much your entry point for any action that you do in game. So we can go to the input settings. So if we go to our project settings, go to our input, first thing we're going to check is our action settings, making sure that we do have the action in our input, and then there is a button assigned, okay? So we know that it works because the animation plays, but we know we're just referencing the action name here so that we can search for it in the project, okay? So attack, we're gonna look for attack, so might as well just highlight and copy, Control C to copy anything in Unreal Engine. And then from here, what we're gonna do is go to Window, right? And then down and about halfway through, you'll see this Find in Blueprints. Just click on that. And it should open up a window like this, or possibly even a brand new window that's a tab up here. That's perfectly fine as well. All we need is this tab. It doesn't matter where it's docked. It could be docked down here. It could be docked up here. We need the tab for Find in Blueprints. Doesn't matter where it's located. So first thing you want to do is just paste your event, right? The name of the event. If I hit enter now, it'll show me every single file that has the word attack into it. So look at our animation character. There is our Boolean. The red indicator lets me know it's a Boolean. Also the is, because somebody named this correctly, the is also an indicator, or a has, or had, you know, something that shows ownership, right? That indicates a Boolean. There's a notify here. We see attack finished. Well, we're not sure that's where the problem is. That might be where the problem is. There's a play attack animation. Okay, we know the animation is playing, so we don't need to go there. So basically what I'm doing, step one for debugging, is narrowing down my problem. Okay, I'm trying to find areas in the code that are related, right? But then I want to just eliminate stuff, right? So I know the bools aren't going to be anything related to getting the bullet to spawn, or it could be. I mean, let's check it. So if I come into our and double click anything in the Find in Blueprints, and it'll automatically open up the asset, right? So down here we got our is attack. Let's check our animation preview, right? So we see our guy up here. We're going to click the button. We notice that the animation plays. In fact, we can go to our event graph and look for that attack finished, taking attack off. There is a function called play attack animation. Yep. And we make sure that that bool is set. So everything is set there. So we know that the problem isn't in the animation system, right? So the bool's getting set, it's getting unset here, and we are setting it in play attack animation, okay? This motion graph has nothing to do with the fact that it's spawning. We could check the animation here, right? This play AC attack. So let's check that out real quick. It's gonna take us to this screen here, and the only thing we really wanna check on in here is any of these settings here, make sure that we are playing the correct animation. And then we want to actually go back up one to the motion graph and find the attack and make sure that we do have that left state for attack finish. So we're checking everything related to the attack to eliminate areas of the code that we know are working fine. So let's check the base character here. We'll start with the input action itself, all right? So from here, we see that we're calling the play attack animation. We know this is working, but this is a good entry point, right? So what we can do is we can add a breakpoint here. We can just say, right-click the node. So if you right-click in the node anywhere, except for on top of the pins, right? They're context sensitive to the pins, but anywhere else in the node, it'll bring up your node actions context menu. And then down here at the kind of the bottom, you can add a breakpoint. All right. Now, breakpoints work the same way in Unreal Engine as they do in Visual Studio. Just real quick, let me bring that up. I'm just going to open up Visual Studio and show you the same, basically the same behavior, right? So if I come over here, if I place a breakpoint on a specific line, the code will stop executing there. So if I run it, the code will show me an arrow pointing to that line, and then I can look at any of the variables associated with the code. I can look at the functions. I can even right-click and go to definition of a function, and so on and so forth, right? Well, you got the same exact behavior in Unreal Engine, okay? So with this blueprint node having a breakpoint associated with it, I can hit the play button, and then when I perform the action, we'll notice the screen goes gray, right? That lets us know that the breakpoint has been triggered. We get that big arrow showing us what node or line of code we're on. Think of the nodes as lines of code, okay? So what node are we on? And then we see up here in our toolbar has changed, and we have some extra features that allow us to manipulate. Same thing in Visual Studio. We get a step over function, which moves the arrow onto the next line. And we have a step into and a step out of. We also have this find node here. We can do a frame skip. We can change our debug filter. Debug filter is objects that are placed in the level. As you can see here, my world outliner, I have 2 base characters. In the debug filter, I have 2 base characters, right? And the reason it's selecting the bottom one is that's because the players spawned in the world, and usually anything that's spawned in the level, it's placed at the bottom of the list. Anything that's placed in the level is placed towards the top of the list. And I could have like 1 million base characters in the level, and this list would be 1 million base characters long, but every single object that's in the level shows up in the debug filter when it's related to this specific blueprint, okay? Notice I didn't have any doors or brushes or keys or anything else in there. It's just relating to my base character, okay? So we can continue to step over and see what's going on, but as you can see, as soon as I step off of the attack animation, it disappears, right? So we know at this point that it's executing something else somewhere else. And we can check even down here, open up this debug. You may not see this window, but for me, I already had it open, so it opened up this debug tab and allows me to do some things here. To get to that, we're gonna open up our window here, go to Developer Tools, and then just click the Blueprint Debugger. And you'll get a whole brand new tab. Maybe not this one associated with debug, but a brand new tab which has the same, this is the execution flow. As you can see, it's the same window down here as it is up here. And basically that just kind of shows us every single node that gets called. Now, all these unknown ones are probably C++, or like the value says, the object no longer exists. So it fell out of scope, and we can't do any debug information. I can click these hyperlinks, and once I click the hyperlinks, it'll take me to that trace right here, where it's calling the attack animation. And we see that it's setting that, and we can pause, we can resume. We can check the call stack, which shows us how we got to this point. So from the base characters input action attack in an event graph, we see that we're calling this node. And if I double click that node, it takes me to the animation blueprint, okay? We can conversely watch stuff. So if I right click any variable, I can do this watch value. Let's go to the base character. Easier to do it over here. So if I add this anim blueprint to the watch value, it populates the watches with some important information. And it says execution not pause. So if I stop and run it again and do my attack, shift F1, it's context sensitive. So you have to have the execution paused, meaning you're debugging or you actually hit the pause button to see the value of the watch. But as you can see here, it's filled out with an actual character. And the reason it's so long, the name, it's showing you where in your editor it lives. So right here it says levels. So we know we're in level 1. This PIE stands for play in editor. So we know that it's playing level 1. I don't know what UED stands for, but Unreal Editor Debug Play in Editor, maybe. So level 1, it's a persistent level, it's base character _C_0. So the _C, the _0 is just debug text that's added onto the object to give it a unique identifier, okay? Doesn't really tell us much about the animation blueprint, but we know that it has an actual value. If it does have an actual value, that means the memory address for that animation blueprint is filled out and we can access, read and write to that animation blueprint. In this case, we're reading from the animation to call a function on it. So watches are super important for variables and stuff like that. All right, so we haven't really got anywhere yet. We just know that the bullet isn't firing. Another place we can check for animations, right, is the animation itself. So what I'm going to do, I've noticed that I have a bunch of tabs open in my animation blueprint. Well, this isn't really going to help me a whole lot. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to close down all the tabs that aren't the event graph. And the reason I do that is because each tab that's open is opening and allocating memory, right? Runtime memory, so your computer resources. The more tabs you have open, the more memory you're going to take up. The slower your program is going to run, potential crashes could arise. So when you're dealing with the animation blueprint specifically, close out of everything you're not currently working on. That'll save you so much time. All right. And if you close, like I did, the animation graph over here in the My Blueprints tab, you can just double click any of the graphs and it'll open up a tab if it's not open. We're going to check the motion graph. We're going to go back into our AC attack. And this time we're going to double click the play AC attack and it'll actually open up the animation. And the only thing I'm checking in the animation is to make sure that we do have a trigger setting here, or this is a notify track. So they had to add a notify track, and then for the track, they have to insert a notified track, and then right click in the track and add a notify. We can create a new notify, or we can reference an existing notify. So the reason I'm showing you this stuff is because oftentimes I see under the skeleton notifies, we have multiple ready to fire notifications, okay? That's a bad thing. We only ever want one. And the reason is we only want this one event to be called. It's related to the event graph, ready to fire right here. And it's calling and telling the character, it's grabbing the owner of the animation. So either it's an AI or, excuse me, or the character, and it's calling a function on it. And this little symbol lets me know it's a message. You'll get to that later on, but that's just a way of saying interface function is being called here, okay? So we know that it's targeting the character, so now that we know that the notify is in the animation, we know that we can check right here to see that this ready to fire is getting hit. So if I click, all right, now you notice this time when I click the expecting to trigger a breakpoint, it's not triggering, okay? So we know the breakpoints are there, but it's not triggering. So what do I do at this point? Well, first thing you want to do is hit Shift F1 to get your mouse control back, okay? Go to the editor and then come to the debug filter. Anytime that you know that you placed a breakpoint and it's not triggering, we need to switch what we're looking at in the debug filter. Remember, like I said, the ones that are created by the level or spawned into the level are usually at the bottom. So I'm just going to select that and double check to make sure that that is actually the object that will get triggered. And then as soon as I click now, because I'm selecting the right debug filter object, it will trigger the right instance of the animation and find that breakpoint here. So we know that the notify is getting fired. I can step over and take a look and see the value of my pawn owner. Okay, it is an actual value. It does have a current value, which means that the object does exist, which means this event or this function can get fired off. So what I'm going to do, instead of double clicking, because if I double click this, it'll take me to the interface. What I need to do is find it in the base character. So come to the event graph and let's go to the ready to fire event, okay? Here I can add a breakpoint and then just hit the resume button and we should see it trigger because we were paused here debugging the on ready to fire, and then I added a breakpoint over here on the receiving end, it immediately went to it. Now, if I didn't do that, it would go execute a whole bunch of code and wouldn't come back to this breakpoint until I actually trigger the event to fire again, okay? So from here, what we can do is we can just step over, follow the trace. We're looking at just our values of our variables. And while you're hovering on the certain node, sometimes the values will not populate. And what you're gonna have to do is just step over and see if those values are actually populated, okay? And then when we come to the branch and we step over again, we see that nothing is executed and we're like, oh, now we can see that that these execution lines are not connected. Okay, just double check to make sure. While I'm debugging, I'm just double checking each of these lines, making sure that they're connected, okay? And that these text boxes, anytime we have a text field like this, has some text in it, it's populated. Right. Okay, so I've kind of walked through a bunch of steps to debug some issues. We saw how to place breakpoints. We saw how to step through code. We used the find in blueprints. We used the blueprint debugger. Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff that we could use. And I kind of showed you everything that you're going to need to use to solve any issue that you may run into, okay? So do we have any questions so far about debugging or the steps it takes to debug or placing breakpoints or analyzing code, adding watches? Yes, I will be on Discord to help you. I know it was quite a bit, but I am recording this lecture and I will be posting it on the YouTube channel so that you guys can remember or offload your memory, just reference the video to just follow the steps on how to debug. That will be posted on YouTube later today. All right. So, yeah, it's like I said, it's the same steps that you would do in Visual Studio. The difference is just visual, okay? And that goes with blueprint coding in general. Yeah, you may not be writing every single line in a parameter list for every single function and all this other stuff, but it's the exact same concept as you do in C# or C++, or you get an object, you hit the dot on it or the arrow, depending on what language you're in, and then you'll get access to the functions, right? The only difference is in IntelliSense is better than this context-sensitive menu, but it's pretty much the same thing. You kind of figure out what it is you need to add. Yeah. As far as function goes, and then we have outputs, we have inputs. So a parameter list for inputs. So this condition is a input on the branch, parameter list for the branch, or the if check right here, you know. And then the result, direction, and hit info are your return value. So they actually return a structure here. So like, yeah, I can, let me see here, break, no. Yeah, so this break hit result is this is a structure, has a whole bunch of different values in it. Yeah, you get the same stuff you get in blueprint coding as you do in regular coding. The difference is just you got all these wires and lines, and yeah, it can be confusing. What needs to connect where and what you should be calling, but that just comes with practice. So lots and lots of practice, and I guarantee you will be just as good at blueprint scripting as you are at C# coding or C++ coding. In fact, I personally prefer blueprint scripting to coding. It is a higher level for me concept-wise. Good, we have a question. Glad I was buying some time. Okay. The question is there a way to turn down the motion blur effect that shows up when you move the camera while in your level? Yes, there is. If we select the camera component in the base character, there's a bunch of different camera settings. Let's look for motion. Great. So motion blur, we can check these amounts and adjust the values. I'm not sure if there's any tooltips associated with this. Max distortion, strength of motion blur. 0 is off. Right. Okay. So they even wrote a name that should be renamed to intensity instead of amount, but I guess they never got to it. But right there, camera selected, search for motion, check the amount, and decrease the value. Yeah, motion blur is not fun. Okay, so any other questions? Awesome. All right, well then I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording.